Honorable Foreign Secretary, special guests, excellencies, conveners of this conference, and ladies and gentlemen, assalamu alaikum, and a very good morning to everyone. Canada has been deeply concerned about the fate of the Rohingya community for a long time, but nothing had prepared us for the kind of crisis we witnessed in Myanmar since August 2017. I can assure you that from the beginning of the crisis, Canadians have felt nothing but praise and gratitude for what Bangladesh has been doing, for its humanitarian policies, and without a doubt, a lot of lives have been saved thanks to all of this. Canada is also aware and quite concerned that various impacts are affecting your citizens, your country's economy, its security, its environment, and Canadians want to help. I know that many other countries are also concerned and active and trying to find ways to intervene and assist in this situation. I'm here today, as was just explained by the MC, that because Canada has appointed a special envoy to look into this crisis. So our Prime Minister asked Mr. Bob Rae to become active, to travel around the world, to speak to everyone who has something to say, and to provide him with guidance and advice on what could be done. And I'm here because I have a message to convey on his behalf. Before I do that, I'd like to take a couple of minutes perhaps and describe the context in which Canada has been doing all of this. In Canada, as soon as word reached our country of what was happening in North Rakhine in August 2017, a lot of citizens and NGOs formed a coalition, started organizing rallies and demanding action from our government. Our foreign minister in early September was meeting with these groups, and during one meeting, it was called the Rally for Myanmar Victims, it was called in those days. Nobody knew if we could even say Rohingya without offending someone. In any case, our minister declared that based on the reports, this looks a lot like ethnic cleansing, and that is not acceptable. It is not acceptable for Canadians, and I'm very proud that Canadians are raising their voice here in Canada. So since then, senior officials from Canada have started to visit the refugee camps in Cox's Bazar, have tried to go to Myanmar, not always successfully. In 2017, the second half of 2017, our government approved more than $37 million of funding for relief work in Bangladesh, especially in Cox's Bazar. Additionally, we had various crisis relief fundraising activities in Canada, and private citizens donated in excess of $15 million. In October 2017 is when the Canadian Prime Minister, Justin Trudeau, decided to appoint Bob Rae as his special envoy to Myanmar. In his announcement, the Prime Minister explained, and I quote, "As special envoy, Mr. Rae will reinforce the urgent need to resolve the humanitarian and security crises in Myanmar and to address the situation affecting vulnerable populations, including the Rohingya Muslim community." The Prime Minister's press release stated that Mr. Rae would also advise the Prime Minister on how Canada can best support efforts to respond to the needs of those affected and displaced by the recent violence. So our special envoy first visited Bangladesh and Myanmar in November 2017, before joining our Prime Minister in Vietnam, in the Philippines, where a number of international conferences, ASEAN, APEC, were being held. And many high-level meetings occurred over there, which included significant discussion about the Rohingya crisis that was playing out here in this part of the world. There were many discussions between my Prime Minister, my Foreign Minister, with State Councillor Aung San Suu Kyi, with the Commander-in-Chief in Myanmar, and this work continues. Canada and Bangladesh have also been working closely on a number of files. I can tell you that, for example, a number of resolutions at the United Nations were supported or co-sponsored by our countries, and we've been working closely to make progress. In late December, Mr. Ray, the Special Envoy, returned to Canada and issued what we call his interim findings. So there were no recommendations. It was simply his findings to date. I can tell you that it made it very clear that urgent action was needed, that a lot of international community engagement was necessary on this issue. And he was also emphasizing a lot the fact that there has to be accountability for what has happened in Myanmar. The Canadian government has since announced more than $8 million in recent months of additional aid and is waiting to hear the recommendations from our Special Envoy. In February, I also want to add that our Foreign Minister used Canada's Magnitsky law so to sanction Myanmar's Major General Maung Maung So for his significant role in the violence and persecution that forced Rohingya to leave Myanmar. So this Magnitsky law allows us to impose asset freezes, to travel bans, and various sanctions on specific individuals. And so we have started applying this to some people in Myanmar. So as you can see, Canada's following this crisis very closely. It is one of our foreign policy priorities. It would be a mistake to think that the international community does not care about the Rohingya crisis and the situation in which Bangladesh itself now finds itself. So, the Special Envoy made a second visit to Dhaka in February. He went again to the refugee camps in Cox's Bazar, to Dhaka. He visited Myanmar, Rakhine State, after which he traveled around the world. He went to the United Nations, he visited several world capitals, and he returned to Canada in March to write his final report, including recommendations. Unfortunately, the report itself is not yet public. We think it will become public April 3rd. And in the meantime, Mr. Ray sent me a message which he asked me to share with this conference. Message for the International Conference on the Rohingya Refugee Crisis, Dhaka, April 2nd, 3rd, 2018. I am very grateful to the organizers of this conference and to Benoit Préfontaine, the High Commissioner for Canada to Bangladesh, for the opportunity to share with you some thoughts on the current crisis affecting the Rohingya people. At the end of October, Prime Minister Trudeau asked me to take on this mission of being a special envoy for Canada on this crisis. I have just completed a report entitled, "Tell Them We Are Human," which will be made public on April 3rd, with recommendations to deal with this huge challenge. The report will be available on the internet. The world needs to wake up to the deep human crisis, both in Bangladesh and Myanmar, which will become even more severe with the arrival of the rainy season. Much more needs to be done to ensure the safety and survival of the Rohingya people, 1 million of who are now in southern Bangladesh and several 100,000 still in Rakhine State in Myanmar. The remarkable effort of the Bangladeshi people and government need to be made sustainable by international assistance and engagement. The title of my report comes from an emotional conversation I had with a member of the Rohingya community in Kutupalong camp. At the end of a discussion about what had happened to him and his family over many years, I told him I would be taking his message to a wider public. What did he want me to say? His answer was simple: tell them we are human. Like far too many in history, the Rohingya have been denied their home, their identity, and their dignity. Until this is dealt with, no resettlement plan will be effective. The conditions for a successful repatriation are clear. We need to be certain the Rohingya people have security and dignity. No return can be forced upon them. I am urging the Canadian government to focus more effort as well on the need for accountability for those responsible for the devastation that has happened. Thousands have been killed. Hundreds of villages have been destroyed. These facts are undeniable. There needs to be a systematic gathering of evidence, and those responsible for crimes against humanity need to face justice. This will take a sustained effort on our part. The conflict did not start at the end of August 2017. The marginalization and discrimination against the Rohingya people goes back much farther than that. As Kofi Annan recognized in his report last year, it will take a commitment to change and clear paths to citizenship and inclusion to make progress. I hope that my report will contribute to a wider understanding of the current crisis, and most important, to action to save lives and ensure a better future. I wish your conference well and hope it contributes to these two things as well. And he underlined these two things: greater understanding and action. I look forward to coming soon once again to the region and hearing the results of your efforts. Once again, my thanks to the Canadian High Commission and to the conference organizers. My best wishes to all. Signed, Bob Ray. Thank you so much for listening to this. And once again, thank you for including our special envoy and his message in your conference. Thank you very much. Shobhaike Dhonnobad.